You've probably assumed loving spicy food is just a matter of personal taste, something some people happen to enjoy and others don't. Here's the uncomfortable part. Every single mammal on Earth, including every human baby ever born, reacts to spicy food exactly the same way: immediate rejection. Somewhere along the way, one species learned to override that reaction completely, and it wasn't an accident. So let's actually ask the question properly. Why does a substance specifically engineered by evolution to make mammals stop eating something end up becoming, for an enormous share of humanity, one of the most craved flavors on the planet? Because the honest answer isn't that humans simply have unusually tough taste buds, or that spicy food doesn't really hurt as much as it seems. It genuinely does trigger a real pain response every single time in every single person who eats it. The story of why we keep coming back for more is considerably stranger than simple tolerance. Let's start with what's actually happening physically, because it's genuinely counterintuitive once you understand the mechanism. When you bite into a chili pepper, there's no actual heat involved, no burning, no tissue damage occurring anywhere in your mouth. The compound responsible, capsaicin, works by binding directly to a nerve receptor called TRPV1, a receptor whose entire biological purpose is detecting genuine thermal heat, the kind you'd get from touching something actually hot. Capsaicin essentially hijacks that receptor, tricking it into firing exactly as if your tongue were being scorched, even though nothing resembling real heat is present at all. Your brain receives a full, urgent pain signal generated entirely by a piece of plant matter sitting harmlessly in your mouth. Researchers studying this mechanism in detail, work that eventually earned a Nobel Prize in physiology, established that pain and heat detection run through shared neural wiring in the human body, meaning capsaicin doesn't create some entirely new sensation. It simply exploits an existing alarm system built for a completely different purpose. This explains why the sensation feels so genuinely urgent and real, because as far as your nervous system is concerned, it is real, the exact same signal your body would generate from actual thermal injury, just triggered by a chemical shortcut instead. This raises an obvious evolutionary question worth exploring directly. Why would a plant invest energy in evolving a molecule whose only apparent function is triggering a false alarm in anything that eats it? The answer connects to a genuinely elegant piece of plant biology involving seed dispersal. Chili plants need their seeds spread away from the parent plant, and critically, those seeds need to survive the journey intact. Mammals present a genuine problem here, since mammalian teeth are specifically built for grinding, flat molars designed to crush food thoroughly, meaning any seeds a mammal swallows generally get destroyed in the process rather than passed through intact. Birds represent an entirely different situation, typically swallowing seeds whole and excreting them fully intact, sometimes carried considerable distances from the original plant. Capsaicin solves this exact dispersal problem with remarkable precision because birds show essentially no sensitivity to it at all. A bird can consume the spiciest pepper imaginable and register virtually nothing unusual, while a mammal encountering that same pepper gets the full pain response immediately. Researchers studying wild pepper populations have documented this pattern repeatedly in natural settings. Birds feeding freely on peppers that squirrels and other mammals sample once and then permanently avoid. The plant essentially built a highly specific lock, one that only birds happen to hold the biological key to, meaning every time a human eats a chili pepper, they're voluntarily disabling a defense mechanism specifically evolved over an enormous span of evolutionary time to keep mammals exactly like them away. There's a genuinely interesting layer of individual variation worth examining here too, because not every human experiences capsaicin exposure identically, and understanding why adds real depth to this picture. Researchers studying TRPV1 receptor genetics have found measurable variation across individuals in exactly how sensitive that receptor is to capsaicin binding, meaning some people experience a considerably stronger pain response to the exact same objective capsaicin concentration than others do, independent of any learned tolerance or cultural exposure. This genetic variation helps explain part of why spice tolerance can vary so dramatically between individuals even within the same family or cultural background, though researchers studying this have consistently found that learned tolerance through repeated exposure remains the dominant factor overall, capable of producing far larger differences in tolerance than baseline genetic receptor sensitivity alone. So why did humans specifically become the exception to a rule that appears to hold reliably across essentially every other mammal species on the planet? It's worth establishing something important first, because this isn't some kind of built-in human trait present from birth. Human infants tasting capsaicin for the first time react exactly the way every other mammal does. Immediate rejection, crying, pushing the food away. If a taste for spicy food were simply hardwired into human biology, you'd expect every culture worldwide to have independently discovered and embraced it at roughly similar rates. That's not remotely what happened. Some regions barely incorporate spice into their cuisine at all, while others build nearly every dish around it. Researchers studying this pattern directly, observing children growing up in communities where chili consumption is culturally universal, found that even in these environments, young children initially reject spicy food exactly like children anywhere else. Genuine enjoyment develops gradually, typically through repeated, small, carefully increasing exposures introduced by parents over an extended period, until a child's response shifts meaningfully from rejection toward actual enjoyment. Nobody is born already liking chili peppers. The preference gets built incrementally through repeated exposure in a pattern genuinely similar to how people often develop a taste for other initially unpleasant substances like coffee or beer. Part of what makes this gradual shift possible involves a specific neurological trick your body plays on itself. When your body registers what it interprets as significant tissue damage, even though none is actually occurring, it responds the way it would to any genuine painful injury, releasing endorphins to blunt the perceived pain alongside dopamine, a key component of your brain's reward circuitry. Under normal circumstances, this combination exists specifically to help you cope with and recover from something genuinely harmful. But because your conscious mind understands at some level that a chili pepper isn't actually going to cause lasting damage, you end up experiencing the reward chemistry without any of the corresponding real-world consequences. Researchers studying this phenomenon have given it a specific name: benign masochism, describing situations where the body registers a genuine threat signal while the mind simultaneously recognizes there's no actual danger present. A combination that shows up in several other common human behaviors too: riding roller coasters, watching intentionally frightening movies, or jumping from an airplane with a parachute. In each case, your physiological threat response system activates fully, while your conscious understanding of safety allows you to experience something closer to enjoyment than genuine fear, a distinctly human capacity to separate perceived danger from actual danger and extract something rewarding from that specific gap. This still leaves an important piece of the puzzle unexplained though, because individual psychology alone doesn't account for why entire regions of the world built their culinary traditions heavily around intense spice, while other regions largely avoided it. Researchers investigating exactly this question compared traditional recipes from around the world against regional climate data, and found a remarkably strong, consistent correlation. Hotter climates showed dramatically higher spice usage than cooler ones, often by a substantial margin rather than a marginal difference. The explanation traces back to something with surprisingly little to do with flavor preference at all: food safety. Before refrigeration existed, meat and other perishable foods spoiled considerably faster in warm climates, and that spoilage carried genuine, sometimes fatal, health risks. Many common spice compounds, capsaicin included, turn out to possess genuine antimicrobial properties, meaningfully slowing the growth of exactly the kind of bacteria responsible for foodborne illness. Cultures situated in consistently hot climates that developed heavy spice traditions weren't purely chasing flavor. They were, whether consciously understood at the time or not, gaining a genuine practical survival advantage. Over many generations, this practical habit gradually transformed into deeply rooted culinary tradition and eventually into cultural identity itself, entirely independent of the original food safety rationale that likely helped establish the pattern in the first place. Once this specific habit took hold in one part of the world, it didn't remain isolated for long, and the historical spread of chili peppers specifically represents a genuinely remarkable case study in rapid global culinary transformation. Chili peppers evolved exclusively in the Americas, cultivated by indigenous peoples in Mexico and Central America for thousands of years before existing anywhere else on Earth. Following European contact with the Americas in the late 15th century, chili peppers spread across the globe at a pace that genuinely surprises historians studying global food history, reaching Africa, India, and Southeast Asia within just a few generations. Within roughly a century, cuisines across dramatically distant, unrelated cultures had already begun incorporating a plant that, shortly before, had never existed anywhere outside a single continent. Today, it's genuinely difficult to imagine several major global culinary traditions without chili as a foundational ingredient, despite this plant's remarkably recent specific evolutionary origin as a mammal deterrent mechanism. The same molecule a plant engineered specifically to repel mammals became, across an astonishing astonishingly short span of human history, a source of comfort, cultural identity, and genuine culinary artistry across a huge portion of the world's population. There's a genuinely interesting modern medical dimension worth exploring here as well, because capsaicin's unusual ability to hijack pain signaling pathways turned out to have genuine therapeutic applications well beyond the dinner table. Researchers studying chronic pain treatment have developed capsaicin-based topical treatments specifically designed to exploit this exact receptor mechanism, applying concentrated capsaicin directly to affected areas in controlled medical settings. Counterintuitively, sustained or repeated capsaicin exposure can actually desensitize the very same nerve fibers it initially overstimulates, eventually reducing their ability to transmit pain signals at all. This has led to legitimate studied medical applications for certain types of chronic nerve pain and arthritis discomfort, a genuinely unexpected therapeutic pathway that traces directly back to the same core biological mechanism responsible for the burning sensation of a hot pepper. The very system a plant evolved specifically to cause mammals discomfort has, through careful medical application, been repurposed to relieve it instead. So the picture that emerges here isn't really about humans having somehow evolved immunity to a plant's chemical defenses, or about spicy food genuinely hurting less than it appears to. It's about a uniquely human capacity, built on real neurological reward mechanisms, measurable genetic variation in individual sensitivity, cultural transmission across generations, and a specific historical and climatic pattern tied to food safety, to take a molecule specifically evolved to repel us and transform it into something actively sought out, culturally celebrated, medically repurposed, and passed down deliberately from parent to child as an acquired, genuinely valued taste. So the next time you reach for something spicy, it's worth remembering that every other mammal on this planet, faced with the exact same molecule, responds by walking away and never coming back. Somewhere in human history, an entire species looked at that same warning signal and, through some combination of neurological reward, cultural practicality, and generations of deliberate practice, decided the pain was worth pursuing, then carried that decision to nearly every corner of the world it ever reached, and eventually even found a way to turn that same ancient warning system into a form of medicine.